everyone, and welcome back. Today I have chosen to read not just one, but two chapters. They are chapters 8 and 9. So without further ado, let's get started, because this is going to be a whole ton of reading. Chapter 8, The Potions Master. There, look! Wow, next to the tall kid with the red hair, wearing the glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see his scar? Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People lining up outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him or doubled back to pass him in the quarters again staring. Harry wished they wouldn't because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts. That's long. Wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place. And doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could walk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right directions, but Peeves the Poltergeist was worth two locked doors and a trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you invisible, grab your nose and screech, "Gotcha, Clunk!" Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door that unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds quarter on the third floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, and he was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose and was threatening to lock them in the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch owned a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-covered creature with bulging, limp-like eyes just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors of Limb. Break a rule in front of her, just put one toe out of line, and she'd whisk off for Filch, who'd appear wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageway of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then once you had managed to find them, there were the classes themselves. There was a lot more magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of the different stars and movements of the planets. 3 times a week, they went out to the greenhouses behind the castle to study herbology with a dumpy little witch called Professor Sprout, where they learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi and found out what they were used for. Easily the most boring class was history and magic, which was the only one taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind it. Binns droned on and on while they scribbled down names and dates and got Emmerich the evil and Ulrich the oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charm teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first class, he took the roll call, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave it an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they sat down in her first class. Transfigurations is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started. But soon realized they weren't going to be changing furniture into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started trying to turn into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match, and Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy, and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class had really been, everyone had been really looking forward to, was defense against the dark arts, but Quirrell's lessons turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he met in Romania. It was afraid he would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told him, had been given him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie, but they weren't sure they believed his story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell fought off the zombie, Quirrell and Pinkin started talking about the weather for another. They had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families, and like him, had an idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much up to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "I think that's right now." "Double potions with the Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of Slytherin House. They say he always favors them. We'll be able to see if it's true." "Wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then the mail arrived. Harry had gotten used to this by now, but it had given him a bit of a shock on the first morning, when 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the Great Hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners, and dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew into Nibble's ear and had a bit of toast before going to sleep in the armory with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. It said in a very untidy scroll, "Dear Harry, I know you get Friday afternoon job, so would you like to come and have a cup with me around 3? I can't wait. I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig. Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's quill and scribbled, "Yes, please. See you later," on the back of the note, and sent Hedwig off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potions lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. Sorry about that. At the start of term banquet, Harry had gotten the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potion lesson, he knew he had been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potions lessons took place down in one of the dungeons. It was colder than here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the prickled animals floating in glass jars all around the walls. Snape Flitwick started the class by taking a roll call, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. Ah, yes, he said softly. Harry Potter, our new celebrity. First Snape in person in this video. I hope it does Alan Rickman justice. May he rest in peace. Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle snickered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold, empty, and made you think of dark tunnels. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping the class silent without effort. As there is little foolish wand waving here, many of you will believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its simmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through the human veins, bewitching the mind and snaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame and glory, and even stop death. If you want as big bunch of thunderheads they usually have to teach. More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. Potter, Snape said suddenly. What would I get if I added a powdered root of a Fellsdale to an infusion of wormwood? Powdered root of what to an infusion of what? Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Harry's hand shot up in the air. I don't know, sir, said Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. Tut, tut. Fame clearly isn't everything. He ignored Hermione's hand. Let's try again. Potter, where would you look if I told you to find me a bizarre? Hermione stretched her hand high into the air as it would go without leaving her seat. But Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a bazaar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who were shaking with laughter. I don't know, sir. Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, eh, Potter? Harry forced himself to keep looking into the street. Those cold eyes. Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his book at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything about some magical herbs and fungi? Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching toward the dungeon ceiling. I don't know, said Harry quietly. I think Hermione does, though why don't you try her? A few people laughed. Harry caught Seamus' eye and Seamus blinked. Snape, however, was not pleased. Sit down, he snapped at Hermione. For your information, Potter, Asphodel and Murmuring is a sleeping potion so powerful that it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A bezoar is the stone taken from the stomach of a goat and will save you from most poisons. As for Moxwood and Wolfsbane, they are the same thing, which also goes by the name of aconite. Well, why aren't you all copying this down? There was a sound of rummaging for clues and parchment. Over the noise, Snape said, "And a point will be taken from Gryffindor House for your cheek, Potter." Things didn't improve for the Gryffindors as the potions lessons continued. Snape put them all in pairs and set them into mixing the simple potion to cure boils. Dealing with a lot of acne problems, I want that potion in real life, please. He swept around in his long black cloak, watching them lay dried nettles and crushed snake veins, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, who seemed to have liked. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs when clouds of acid green smoke and loud hissing filled the dungeon. Neville had managed to melt Seamus's cauldron into a twisted blob, and their potion was sleeping across the stone floor, burning holes in people's shoes. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools while Neville, who had been drenched in the potion when the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain, and his angry red boils sprang up all over his arms and legs. "Idiot boy!" snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his wand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire." Neville whimpered as the boil started to pop all over his nose. "Take him up to the hospital wing," Snape spat at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who had been working next to Neville. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look good if you got it wrong, did you? That's another point you lost for Gryffindor." This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. "Don't push it," he muttered. "I've heard Snape can turn very nasty." As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing and his spirits were low. He'd lost 2 points for Gryffindor in his very first week. Why did Snape hate him so much? "Cheer up," said Ron. "Snape's always taking off points off of Fred and George. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you?" At 5 to 3, they left the castle and made their way across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of galoshes were outside the front door. When Harry knocked, they heard a frantic scrapping room inside and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice ran out saying, "Bach, baby, Bach." Rest in peace, Robbie Coltrane. Hagrid's big hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. "Hang on," he said. "Back, Flame." He went them in, struggling to keep a hold of onto the collar of an enormous black boarhound. There was only one room inside. Hams and pheasants were hanging from the ceiling. A copper kettle was boiling on the open fire, and in the corner stood a massive bed and a patchwork quilt all over it. "Make yourself at home," said Hagrid, letting go of Fane, who bounded straight at Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, Fane was clearly not as fierce as he looked. "This is Ron," Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a large teapot and putting rock cakes onto a plate. "Another Weasley, eh?" said Ron, glancing at Ron's freckles. "I spent half me life chasing your twin brothers, leaving the forest." The rock cakes were shapeless lumps with raisins that almost broke their teeth. But Harry and Ron pretended to be and join them as they told Hagrid all about their first lessons. Fane rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his robes. Another good reason why I'm a cat person. No offense, Hagrid. Harry and Ron were delighted to hear Hagrid call Filch that'll get. And as for the cat, Mrs. Norris, I'd like to introduce her to Fang sometime. Sorry about that. Did you know every time I go up to the school, she follows me everywhere? Can't get rid of her. Filch puts her up to it. Harry told Hagrid about Snape's lesson. Hagrid, like Ron, told Harry not to worry about it, but Snape liked hardly any of the students. But he seemed to really hate me. Rubbish, said Hagrid. Why would he? Why should he? Yet Harry couldn't help thinking that Hagrid didn't quite meet his eyes when he said that. How's your brother Charlie? Hagrid asked her. I liked him a lot. Great with animals. Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the subject on purpose. While Ron told Hagrid all about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry picked up a piece of paper that was lying on the table under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in latest. Investigations continue to the break-in at Gringotts on the 31st of July. Widely to believe the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault was searched, had in fact been emptied the same day. But we're not telling you what's in there, so keep your nose out if you know what's good for you, said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Harry remembered Ron telling him on the train that someone tried to rob Gringotts, but Ron hadn't mentioned the date. Hagrid, said Harry, that Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while they were there. There was no doubt about it. Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eyes this time. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read the story again. The vault that was searched had been, in fact, emptied earlier that same day. Hagrid had emptied vault 713, if you can call that empty, and taking out that grubby little package. Had that been what the thieves were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked back to the castle for dinner, their pockets weighed down with the rock cakes they'd been too polite to refuse. Harry thought that none of the lessons he had so far had been given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid collected the package just in time? Where was it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? That is the end of Chapter 8. So let's continue forth with Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first year's Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in the Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and both Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, Harry said darkly. Just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to flying more than anything else. You don't know that you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron reasonably. Anyway, I know Malfoy's always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but if that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting on house Quidditch teams and told Ron boastful stories that always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. Okay. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared their dormitory about soccer. Different sport. I should know. Shout out to Alexa, who plays the sport. Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding off Dean's poster of West Ham soccer team trying to make the players move. Sorry, wrong character. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she had good reason because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents that, even with both feet on the ground, Hermione Granger was almost as nervous as flying as Neville was. This was something that she couldn't learn by heart out of the book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bore the most stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of the library book called Quidditch Through the Ages. I have that one too. Neville was hanging on to her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang onto his broomstick for later, but everybody else was pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by a single arrival of mail. Harry hadn't had a single brother since Hagrid's note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice at first. Malfoy's eagle eye was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. The barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed him a glass bowl the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. "It's a membrel," he explained. "Gran knows I forget things. This tells you there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, if you hold it tight like this and if it turns red, his face fell because the membrel had suddenly turned glowed scarlet. "You've forgotten something." Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the membrel out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for reasons to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. Useful ability, if you ask me. "What's going on?" "Malfoy's got my membrel, Professor." Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the membrel back on the table. Just looking," he said, and he slipped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for their first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school broom, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short grey hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. "Stick your right hand over your broom," called Madame Hooch at the front, "and say, 'Up!'" I don't have my broom on me, so I'll just use my bookmark. "Up!" Everyone shouted. Hermione, sorry, wrong character. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Okay. Again, I'm using my bookmark here because my broom is elsewhere. Up. Hermione Granger's head simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when you're afraid, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madam Hooch then showed him how to mount their brooms without sliding off on the end, and walked up and down the rows, correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told him Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick up from the ground hard, said Madam Hooch. Keep your broom steady. Rise a few feet, then come back straight down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle. 3, 2. But Neville, jumpy, and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed up hard before the whistle had touched Madam Hooch's lips. Come back, boy! She shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle, 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face look down at the ground, falling away, saw him glide slip sideways off the broom, and wham! A thud and nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still raising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madam Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist. Harry heard her mutter. Come on, boy. It's all right. Up you get. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You need those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madam Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face, the great lump? The other Slytherins joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Parvati Patil. Ooh, sticking up her long bottom, said Pansy Parkin. Said a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati. Look, said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the ground. It's that stupid thing Bottom's grand sent him. The emerald glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry. Quietly, everyone stopped talking to us. Malfoy snapped smiled nestily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled, but Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level and with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Come and get it, Potter! Harry grabbed his broom. No! shouted Hermione Granger. Madam Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he'd found something he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled up his broomstick a little to take it even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground and admiring look from Ron. He turned to his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. Give it here, Malfoy called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah? Said Malfoy, trying to sneer but looking worried. Harry knew somehow what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both his hands and shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No crab and goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground, he caught it just in time to pull his broom straight, and he tumbled gently onto the grass with the mumble clutched safely in his vest. Harry Potter! His heart sank faster than he just died. Professor McGonagall was running toward him. He got to his feet, trembling. Never! In all my time at Hogwarts! Professor McGonagall was speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed fiercely. How dare you! You might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patel. Malfoy. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patel. But Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as he strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sleeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bags in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on the doorstep? Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open doors and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on as gatekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stumped on the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside the classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Could I borrow wood for a moment? Wood? Thought Harry, bewildered. Was wood a cane she was going to use on him? But wood turned out to be a person. A burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. Follow me, you two, said Professor McGonagall when they marched up the corridor, Wood looking curiously at her. In here. Professor McGonagall pointed them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on the blackboard. Out, Peeves! She barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, which clanged loudly, and he swooped out, cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the two boys. Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Boys, I found you a seeker! Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. Are you serious, Professor? Absolutely, said Professor McGonagall. The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter? Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be expelled, and some of the feeling started coming back to his legs. He caught the thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive, Professor McGonagall told one. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood was now looking as though all his dreams had come true at once. Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter? He asked excitedly. Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team, Professor McGonagall explained. He's just the build for Seeker 2. Oops, probably. He's just the build for Seeker 2, said Wood now, talking around Harry and staring at him. Right, Speedy? We'll have to get him a decent room, Professor. A Nimbus 2000 or a Clean Sleep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we can't bend the first year rule. Heaven knows we need a better team than last year. Flattened in that last match by Slytherin, I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks. Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. I want to hear your training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you. Then she suddenly smiled. Your father would have been proud, he said. He was an excellent Quidditch player himself. You're joking! It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron about what happened when he drifted runs with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. Seeker, he said. But first years never... You must be the youngest player in about a century, said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. Wood told me. Ron was so amazed, so impressed, he just sat and gaped at Harry. I start training next week, said Harry. Only, don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Wood told us we're on the team too. Beat us! I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team's going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he found a new secret passageway out of the school. Bet it's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Swami that we found in our first week. See ya! Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having the last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the High Teacher was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'd take you any time out my own, said Malfoy. Tonight if you want. Wizard's Duel. 1 room only. No contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a Wizard's Duel before, I suppose? Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm his second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight, all right. We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always a nod. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. What is a Wizard's Duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, the second's there to take over if you die, said Ron, casually getting started on at last on his cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he asked quickly, but people only die in proper duels, with real wizards. Most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. Neither of you know enough magic to do any real damage. I bet that he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and pat him on the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me. They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. Can't a person eat in peace in this place? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you could, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go round and around the school that night. Think of the points you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught, and you're bound to be. It's really selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you'd call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice, such as if he tries to curse you, you better dodge it because I can't remember how to block them. There was a very good chance they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris, and Harry felt he was pushing his block, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered at last. We'd better go. They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They almost reached the portrait hall when a voice spoke from the chair nearest to them. I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry. A lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. You, said Ron fiercely. Go back to bed. I almost told your brother, Hermione snapped. Percy, he's a prefect. He put a stop to this. Harry couldn't believe anyone could be so interfering. Come on, he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the Fat Lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you. Here's all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing about switching spells. Go away. All right, but I warned you. Just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. But what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of that lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty page. The Fat Lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. Now what am I going to do? She asked shrilly. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. They hadn't reached even the end of the corner when Hermione caught up with them. I'm coming with you, she said. You are not. Do you think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Phil to catch me? If he finds all three of us out telling the truth and I was trying to stop me, and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, Ron said loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. There was a sort of snuffling. Mrs. Norris, breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris, it was Neville. He was curled up on the floor fast asleep, with Dirk suddenly awake as they crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voice down, Neville. The password's pig snout, but it won't help you now. The Fat Lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville, showing them. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to be somewhere. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here alone. The bloody Baron's been passed twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then glared furiously at Hermione and Neville. If either of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I learn about that curse of the bogies Crow told us about. And I used it on you. Hermione opened her mouth to perhaps tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of bogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned them all forward. They flitted along corridors striped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Belgium or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shields, plates, and statues winked silver and gold in the darkness. They etched them on the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors at either end of them. Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy left it and started at once. The minutes crept by. He's light. Maybe he's chickened out, Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around, my sweet. They might be looking in the corner. It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Horror struck, Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently toward the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's ropes had barely whipped around the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. Though in here somewhere, they heard him mutter. Probably hiding. This way. Harry remounted the others, and petrified they began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, wrapped Ron around the waist, and the pair of them tumbled right into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. Run! Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung up around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor and then another, Harry in the lead without any idea where they were going. They ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway, hurtled along, and then came out near their charms classroom, which they knew was miles from the trophy room. I think we lost him, Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and wiping his forehead. Neville was bent double, wheezing and spluttering. I told you, Hermione gasped, clutching at the stitch in her chest. I told you. We've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower, said Ron, quickly as possible. Hermione Malfoy tricked you, Hermione said to Harry. You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Harry thought she was probably right, but wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. Shut up, Peeves, please, you'll get us thrown out, Peeves cantered. Wandering on a midnight, ickle busties. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away, Peeves, please. Should tell, bitch, I should, said Peeves in a saintly voice, but his eyes glittered with her. It's for your own good, you know. Get out of the way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a big mistake. Students out of bed, Peeves bellowed. Students out of bed down the charms corridor. Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives right to the end of the corridor where they swung into a door and it was locked. This is it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly at the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps, Filch running as fast as he could towards Peeves' shouts. I'll move over. Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, Alohomora! The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through it, shut it quickly, and pressed their ears against it, listening. Which way did they go, Peeves? Filch was saying. Quick, tell me. Say please. Don't mess with me, Peeves. Now where did they go? Shan't say nothing if you don't say please, said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. All right, please. Nothing. Ha! Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. He thinks this door's locked, Harry whispered. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville. For Neville had been tugging on Harry. on the sleeve of Harry's bathrobe for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what. For a moment he was sure he'd walked into a nightmare. This was too much on top of everything that happened so far. They weren't in a room, as he had supposed. They were in a corridor. The forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor. And now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog. A dog that filled the whole space between the ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling mad eyes, 3 noses, twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 jewelry mouths, live and hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes staring at them. And Harry knew that the only reasons that they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise, but it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Harry groped for the doorknob between Filch and Death. He'll take Filch. They fell backward. Harry slammed the door shut and they ran, almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried up to look for them somewhere else because they didn't want to see him anywhere, but they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of that lady on the 7th floor. Where on earth have you all been? She asked, looking at their bathrobes hanging off their shoulders and their flushed, bloody faces. Never mind that. Pig snout, painted Harry and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed trembling into armchairs. As loudly for any of them said, they never indeed looked as though he never speak again. What do you think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in a school? Said Ron finally. Any dog needs exercise, that one does. Hermione had got both her breath and bad temper back again. You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you? She snapped. Didn't you see what it was standing on? The floor, Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at its feet, I was too busy with its heads. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. She stood up, glaring at them. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could have all been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed. Ron stared after her, his mouth open. No, we don't mind, he said. You'd think we dragged her along, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about as he climbed back into bed. The dog was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was. And that, while enjoyable, is the end. Join me next week for a special surprise for Chapter 10, Halloween! Bye!